think we could get started.
I think we're
Hi.
on.
Okay. Hi. I'm Neha. This is Alpha something, and wait, I
Hello,
will be
everyone.
I will be sharing my screen. Da, 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 1 second. There we go. So hi. As I said, I am Neha. This is Alpha something, and we are presenting Sounds of Venba. So hi, my name is Neha. I am a freelance composer sound designer based out of Quebec City. I'm currently working on multiple indie little projects, most notably Spleen, which is a 2D action RPG Persona style game that's early in its production. I just released Mini Maker, which is a figure building sandbox game, which is like Bob Ross meets Gross Lego in 3D. There's no undo button, so it's the perfect game for a perfectionist. Um, a couple stuff for the playdate, and then some sound design for this game called Eternites. If you have any questions after the presentation, please feel free to reach out to me on Twitter at Nehapolitan, and I'll leave it to Alpha something.
Thank you, Neha. I'm Alpha Something. I'm an independent artist. I've worked on several music videos and been part of singles and albums. Venba is my first video game as a composer, which I'm very excited to be part of. And it's been a huge learning experience for me composing video game music, as it's not something I've done before. But I'm bringing a lot of my Tamil poetry, music, and composition experience to this. Really excited to see how it turns out, and excited to talk to everyone about it, about how we make it happen.
So yeah, we are both working on a game called Venba. Just 1 second, I'm gonna close this. And so my role here is to do the sound design and implementation. And as Alpha something said, he's writing the music. So what is Venba? Venba is a cooking narrative game where you play as an Indian mom who immigrated to Canada with her family in the 80s. So you cook various dishes. There's a like a puzzle aspect to it. There's a lot of deep conversations, and it says a lot. It's more than just a cooking game. It's a story about family, love, loss, and a lot more. So here is a little trailer to have a little clue of what this is.
தானே நானா தன்னே நன்னே நானா தானே நானா தன்னே நன்னே நானா தன்னே 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 நா குருவி ஒண்ணு இருந்துச்சா கூண்டுக்குள்ள வளர்ந்துச்சா கூண்டை விட்டு வெளியே வரும் கனவுல தான் மிதந்துச்சா கனவுக்குள்ள தர இறங்கி நடந்து நடந்து பழகுச்சான்.
So yes, that is Venba. Just a second, I need to. Oops.
All right. I want to give a little shout out to our team who is from, as you can see on this map, all over the world. We have folks from Toronto, Ottawa, San Francisco, Gujarat, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, Dhaka, Bangladesh, and Jakarta in Asia. So uh, all of these people bring their own flavor of what it means to be part of Venba. And I think if you go to the next slide, Neha,
Yes.
even in India, you can see that in the Indian subcontinent, we're all from different places. Neha's from Gujarat. I'm from Chennai. Abhi, the maker of this game, he's also from Chennai. And coincidentally, Venba is also supposed to be from Chennai. She's Chennai based. Um, so a lot of what we know about Indian culture comes from the north of India. So Venba is an attempt to represent South Indian culture and kind of bring out the unique aspects of that in the game.
Yeah, so as Alpha something mentioned, a lot of the cuisines that we see, like in North America, especially, is very North Indian focused, especially like Punjabi cuisine, which is way up north over here. But there's so much more variety to our food than just that. India, you have to think of India as not as one country, but rather as multiple countries stuck together into one. So we have different like every single province has its own language, not counting all the sub dialects and sub languages, and like it's like a branching narrative game, but for languages. So we have our own languages, our own cuisines, our own cultures. Everything is very, very, very different. Um, and there is a lack of representation, I would say, for regions out of the northern states. So I am from Gujarat, which is a bit more northern, but on the west coast. I'm from a village called At. So our cuisine, it was a very humbling and a big learning experience for myself as well, where a lot of our spices are quite similar to South Indian spices. It's stuff that I recognize, especially like the whole ground spices. We have different names for it, but it was recognizable. However, what I did, what was the big learning curve was like all these tools that they were using, like cooking tools that I personally never saw, never used, and even just dishes that I had no idea that you can make something out of this ingredient. So it was a big learning experience. It wasn't just because, oh, we're both Indian, so we could just get along. It's gonna, I know what they're talking about. I actually didn't. Um, I really had to learn a lot about their culture, and it was a great experience of just back and forth of culture sharing.
Absolutely. So here you see a spread of South Indian food, and you'll see dishes that you maybe don't really get to see in pop culture as a representation of Indian food. The reason South Indian cuisine is so different is also geographically important because in southern India, the weather is different from that of North India. We have warmer climates in general, and we grow a lot of rice. And we're also a coastal region, so there's a lot of seafood as part of our culture. South India is also known very infamously to have flouted the beef ban laws that recently happened in India. So our cuisine is really a huge part of our culture, and Venba is an attempt to kind of represent that in the media.
So now let's get into the nitty gritty part. I am in charge of the sound design. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the pre-production, the tools that we use, and finally, I will showcase a whole bunch of recordings and talk about what went well, what went bad. So first of all, what was really cool with this project was that I had a lot of time to do pre-production. I actually watched a lot of Tamil movies and just to understand, like, hey, what is this, looking like? And with Avi, our lead designer, we had a lot of conversations, a lot of back and forth of what do we want this soundscape? Like what is the theme here? So right off the bat, we had both agreed that we want Venba to sound like a South Asian household. Um, Even though our cultures are different, there are tools and there's sounds that we just grew up with. And I jokingly say that even though you can't smell Venba, you can hear like where I come from. You can't perhaps smell it, not yet, but I want people to be able to hear the sounds of my childhood, let's say. So for that, the sounds had to be very realistic, nothing cartoony, nothing abstract, but very like very to the core. In Indian culture, steel the material steel has a very big importance. Now, if we go back historically, we used to use clay pots and other material, but I would say in the last 100 years, steel has become a predominant material that we use, not just for cooking, but as dishware. Like we eat from dishes of steel quite often. Our glasses are also steel. So there's like that clinking metallic sound that is very unique to steel material. And that's something I wanted to showcase. There were also specific cooking items. Like I had mentioned, it was a big learning curve to learn about these new equipments that were used in the kitchen. So, and some of them I knew, a lot of them I knew, and some I didn't. And so it was really cool learning about those. And like I had mentioned previously, we wanted to sound very child home like, or just our typical household. So here are a couple of objects of our objects from home. So in the middle, you might recognize this. It's our famous masala box or masala dabo. We hold all of every household. They'll put different spices in their little masala dabo. You'll always see turmeric and the red chili powder. I think over here you see jira, which is I think cumin seeds, and there's different seeds. And uh, I think we all own at least one of these. Here are the steel dish plates I was talking about. In different cultures, you might even eat on a banana leaf, or in my for my region, we eat from a patra leaf. But in a more modern setting or restaurant setting too, this would be a very often used dishware. Again, serving plates, our glasses. These guys will never break. None of these things really break, so it's really good material. And then finally, this is our famous pressure cooker. A lot of our dishes use this, and you'll be seeing it in the game quite a bit. Here is a picture of bangles because in Indian culture, jewelry and wearing bangles has a lot of importance. We're almost I guess in my case, my mother would always wear like a bangle or two or something, and so that means that when you're cooking and when you're doing things, there's this sound that goes clink clink. That's very reminiscent. That's very nostalgic. So I made sure that, and I'll show you a recording of that. That whenever you're cooking and like Venba's cooking, that you hear a little bit of those bangle sounds in the background. Because for me, that's what I mean by like sounds of home, sounds of nostalgia, sounds of childhood. So here is a video of me at my parents' where I grabbed a couple of bangles, and the whole process was that I was actually taking different types of bangles because there's different materials for them, and I would try to record those in different like movements. What I did learn was that the plasticky ones do not sound good, so I tried to stay away from them. The more metallic ones were sounding quite nice, and it's important for me to also take a whole bunch of them because unlike Western fashion, like we don't just wear one bracelet, we have like a couple. So here's a video. Now, for context, we don't wear that many on a regular day at all. It's more that if I wanted the sound to come through, I just needed more bangles on my wrist. So this is the famous masala box that I was talking about. So you could see the image here. So for a lot of the like picking up sounds, I wanted to be, the real sounds of from the container. So you could see me here with my fancy fancy recording equipment. This isn't the proper technique to record sounds or anything, but look, I made do with what I had. And so here's me just grabbing and pouring um, coriander seeds. Here is like the other seeds that I was dropping and stuff. That's that. I'm sorry. Finally, this is the famous pressure cooker. So here again, my setup is just to put the mic on a bunch of books, and it really does do the job. So I did a bunch of books. I just leave it there. I check my volume settings, and then voila. So over here, like I can think you all saw that I was like scratching and like just moving it around in different weird ways. My goal here wasn't to have a perfect sound recording of me just like closing the lid. It was more I needed shorter sounds, I needed longer sounds, I needed a variety. What you don't see in this video is that there's other sounds of me just taking the lid and the bottom of the pot and just doing that like sliding it around in circles to get this circular sound. So I did many, many different movements to get various effects. And finally, a technique that was common almost in many parts of India, and I was glad to see that it's the same in South India, was tempering. So tempering is the thing where you take oil, you heat it up quite a bit, not boiling or anything, but it's hot, and then you pour whole seeds or whole grains or whole some like spices, and the high temperature of the oil plus the addition of the spices makes it so that for one flavor wise like all the smells come out like there's just this different putting it into a soup versus tempering it is a completely different story. So the flavors come out, the smells come out, and it just adds flavor-wise. It's a very important technique. But sound-wise, it's also very very interesting because it pops. Everything pops. It sounds a little scary at times. It's actually also a little bit dangerous because I'll show in the video, but these little seeds they pop, they pop, and if it lands on you, like it's hot, it hurts. There's you can actually get hurt. Not saying that I got hurt. I mean by pure experience. So it's something to be careful with. So here's a video. So, as you could see, there's different types of sounds here. There's the regular sound of just the oils popping at, let's say, medium temperature, but there's a special and the special like sound effect that happens when you pour the seeds onto the oil, especially the very first time. I couldn't capture that on video for safety reasons, but the very first time you pour, there's this big and like this big sound effect that happens, and that's something that we use quite a bit in the game, and that it was really important for us to capture the different types of oil sounds because it's not just like a little bit of sizzling sounds that wouldn't have done Venba justice. We had to capture the different types of different cooking processes basically. And fun fact, after this recording, as you could see, like the seeds were popping out, but they're all oily and stuff. So like my little protector here was all burnt, and my I had to throw it away, and my mic had like a billion oil stains. And this is I don't recommend this you do this at home. It is totally dangerous. I mean, there's you could see that the hairs here and the stove is there, and like yeah, it's not very safe. But it's okay. It's Ravenba. Um, so throughout this like this whole recording process, I learned a lot. For one, just because it sounds like there's just because I'm doing the right technique does not mean I'm getting the right sounds. Oftentimes I felt like, oh wait, I'm doing this thing, but then I'm listening to the recording and it sounds not intense enough. So there was a lot of layering, there was a lot of adjustments. Because I'm not doing this in a proper studio setting, nor am I like, do I have the, I guess, fancy equipment or anything. There was a lot of cleaning up to do with my sound files. So there was quite a bit of work in post-production that I'm currently not showing. But yeah, that was the reality of it. But these were some pretty good takes that I was quite happy with. So I think I will now pass it on to the music.
That sounded great. Thank you, Neha. Um, so the music of Venba, I think broadly the music of Venba can be split into two categories. One would be the score, which is basically anything that plays during the title screen, cutscenes, or like background soundscapes that need to happen when you're in the household of Venba, right? Um, and so let's go ahead and play the score for this. And this is the title sound. Oh,
Uh-oh.
just to it. We're having technical difficulties, guys.
Da, da,
Let's see if
da.
I can share this with you as we do this.
Interactive troubleshooting, yes.
Mhm. Do you have access now?
I'm checking. Let's try again. I'm gonna reload the page.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, it's much better. Yeah, I think that gives a taste of what this score kind of goes for in terms of flavor. And so the score is it could be an entire song, it could be just a piano piece, it could be some form of soundscape that goes on for like 30 seconds. Any combination of this, right? And the score is pretty straightforward to make. You basically look at the scene, you discuss with the designer to kind of see what we're trying to convey in that scene, and see how the score can accentuate that. Not super complex stuff. A lot of fun to work on, but nothing crazy. The next part of the Venba soundtrack is the in-game radio. So there's an in-game radio in the game where as you play through the levels, and as you go to, I think you need to click for the radio to show up, Neha.
Oh, gotcha.
Buttons go on. Oh, there you go. That's the in-game radio we're all talking about. Um, so the radio plays when as a player you're solving the recipe puzzles and going through the gameplay. And so think of it as something like something you would see in GTA, where if you take a car, there's a radio playing in the car, and that plays songs, right? So the songs that play on this radio is the second part of the Venba soundtrack. Next slide. So when making these songs and trying to come up with what needs to play on the radio, it really threw us an interesting challenge, right? Because Venba as a game spans almost 30 years, and so the first time you turn on the radio, it's sometime in the 1980s, and I think one of the last times you turn on the radio, it's in like the early 2000s. So what plays on the radio can't sound the same. It can't be the same thing, or even be the same flavor, because realistically, um, Benba would listen to the music of her times, right? So we basically we had to come up with a way to make these songs, or come up with a formula for what these songs are, and how we're going to do that. And for that, I think as a solution, we just went back to basics and said, you know what? Next slide. Tamil film music is very diverse in that, like, it plays a huge role in how films are made. The music is usually an essential plot device almost. The songs take the story forward, and sometimes the songs in films are remembered far longer than the film itself. And a lot of films are known just by their songs and just by their music. And the people who make these, who we can see some of them here, are Tamil film music composers, are absolute legends. And they have a huge fan following, and it's, they're larger than life personalities that play an important role in culture. So we said, what if each song is styled after one of these composers, right? So basically, the idea would be to, next slide. Uh, for each song, we would come up with a situation and a theme, and like almost come up with a storyline. All of this is completely unnecessary for the game, but it gives the song, that much more realism. So we come up with a situation like, what if this person falls in love with this person, but they're living in difficult times, and then, like, one of them is poor and the other person's rich, so they have this, like, this conflict, social conflict, and the song happens when they're trying to, like, break through all that and get together, right? And that's a pretty typical Tamil cinema, song situation, right? Like, I know Neha's nodding because it's a pretty similar theme in a lot of Indian films. Um, so we come up with something like that, to really give the song a purpose, instead of it being like, oh, let it be a love song, right? So we set the scene like that, and then we come up with melody and lyrics to sound like the style of like whoever would have been the top composer, or like when you turn the radio on in, like, let's say 1988, like whose song would be playing, and then when you turn the radio on in 1995, whose song would be playing, right? So we try to think of that, and just from, like, personal experience, and just knowledge of the film industry, we can come up with some names that are more iconic than others, and try to emulate their style, and what they brought to the soundtrack of films. So it was a pretty, um, I wouldn't call it a shortcut, but it was a great device to anchor the listener to that time period, because by emulating the style of those composers, we're also emulating the sounds of the time, right? The genres that they work with, and I think it's a really interesting way to set set that time period for the player. Next slide. So when we're making these songs, we also connect with artists and find instruments and little sounds and samples that take the listener back to those a specific time period. And I've been very fortunate in that, like, I got to work with a lot of artists that do a bunch of work in the Tamil film industry. So automatically they brought a lot of that experience into the soundtrack of Venba. And with mixing and mastering, the final polished step, um, wasn't anything crazy, but it was a lot of fun to make sure some of the samples weren't, like, super high quality. Like, you can't have those, like, hard hitting 808s showing up in a track in the 80s in Tamil film music. So you had to really, like, um, EQ the final product, to make it sound like it was from the time that it was, that the story was happening in. So, like, with those steps is how we basically made each song sound like it is from a different time than when it was made. Next slide. So in this next few slides, I'm gonna show samples of how one song gets made, um, from the concept phase. Like, I've talked a little bit about, like, how we come up with the situations and how we come up with the themes for the song. So next slide would be the first step of that, where I would basically send the designer a scratch like this. Let's play like a minute. Yeah, so that's a an idea of what the beat sounds like, right? Like you hear almost something like a verse and a chorus, and how it resolves, how the melody resolves, and you see, you know, the tempo and the overall structure of the song, but it currently has nothing else, right? So we go back and forth with the designer, with the team, with this beat, and try to make it perfect before we move on to the next step, which is the vocal reference. And so we get someone to sing track, just to kind of place the lyrics on the beat, and give everyone an idea of what the vocals need to sound like. So let's hear a minute of that.
நீதானே எந்தன் மாலை வானவில் என் தோளில் சாய்ந்து பாடும் பூங்குயில் தேன்மழை தூவும் என் வானிலே ஒரே முறை பேர் சொன்னால் பேரலை மோதும் என் நெஞ்சிலே வெளிச்சம் வந்து சொல்கிறே நேரிலே காதல் வந்தால் காற்றும் தூர செல்லும் காதல் கேட்டால் வானம் பாதை சொல்லும் காதல் வந்தால் காற்றும் தூர செல்லும்
Yeah, so you're hearing the beautiful voice, by the way, of Divya Vivek, who has played a very important role in the soundtrack. She sings almost all of the tracks that we make reference tracks on, and she also has some vocals on the score and a couple of the songs, I think. So that's the beautiful voice of Divya that you heard there. So we make this reference track and send it out to instrumentalists and vocalists to get it recorded. And of course, because of the time that we're making the soundtrack in, a lot of this work is remote, and so the person who's hearing it needs to really bring their own flavor to it. I'm not there. I'm not around for most of the recordings, and I just give a very detailed brief of what it needs to sound like, what the mood is, and you know, references of like things they need to sound like, and kind of expressions that I specifically want for certain words and lines of the song. So and so this reference acts as a device to make that easier. Next slide. The recording phase, which is a lot of fun. So this, a shout out to the video that's about to play here. This is the recording of the string section for this song, and this was recorded in Kiev, Ukraine, back in March 2022 when they were fresh into the war. So it was a very dangerous time for them, and really the logistics of the recording revolved around when it was safe to go out and record and when their city wasn't being bombed. So they would be like, "Oh, we have an emergency in place and we can't like get out to the studio for the next 3 days. So like, please give us some time to like record this." And I'm like, "Oh my God, like this is, like this is not the kind of logistical issue we thought we would run into when making the soundtrack." But we're really grateful for these people, for like still persevering and doing what they do best, and bringing that to be a part of the Venba soundtrack. So let's take a look at like a minute of this.
நீதானே எந்தன் மாலை வானவில் என் தோளில் சாய்ந்து பாடும் பூங்குயில்
Yeah, they're amazing. I've watched this video personally so many times, and like I know this is like a lot of this I composed and made, but they like what they bring to it is just completely magical. They really took the song to the next level. So we get a bunch of recordings like this for various instruments and put it all together, and send it off to mixing and mastering. So the final product sounds something like this. Next slide.
நீதானே எந்தன் மாலை வானவில் என் தோளில் சாய்ந்து பாடும் பூங்குயில் தேன்மழை தூறும் என் வானிலே ஒரே முறை உன் பேர் சொன்னால் பேரலை மோதும் என் நெஞ்சிலே மிச்சம் வந்து சொல்கிறேன் நேரிலே காதல் வந்தால் காற்றும் தூது செல்லும் காதல் கேட்டால் வானம் பாதை சொல்லும் காதல் வந்தால் காற்றும் தூது செல்லும் காதல் கேட்டால் வானம் பாதை சொல்லும்
Yeah, so that gives an idea of how each song gets made. So we have about 4 or 5 of these. Next slide. So as I mentioned at the beginning, these songs are placed, starting from the 80s to the 2010s, and so the flavor of the song, the sonic kind of landscape that they're set in, the genres, and how the vocalist approaches a song, like the recording quality and everything is different, over 3 decades. So it's very, very interesting to kind of like make that journey, all in one soundtrack. So I'm very excited for everyone to hear the soundtrack, and maybe play a guessing game of folks, for at least folks who are familiar with the Tamil film scene, to play a guessing game of which composers and which lyricists we've actually styled each song after. I think that'll be fun. And yeah, like I'm very glad, and fortunate to have been part of this soundtrack, and very excited for everyone to hear us. Thank you.
Thank you,
Neha,
everyone.
I don't know how we're taking questions.
I don't know either. Da, 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 da.
But if anyone has any questions, just communicate it to us telepathically and we'll try to answer.
You could put a radio station on and just get their questions in or something.
That's right. Call us in. One
Yeah, one of those, right?
I think we're
Okay.
almost at time too. So I think
Yeah.
connect with us on Twitter. Ask us any questions that you may have. Give us feedback. Let us know what you thought.
Great. I'm gonna stop sharing the screen, but thank you, everyone. So, yay.
Thank you. Thanks, Neha, for driving.
Oh, I see a question here. So from Ro, questions: will you all release the Venba soundtrack to Bandcamp or similarly? I love to support the love you put into it.
Awesome. Yes. Yeah, we actually do plan on putting it out on Bandcamp, and it will also be available on my website to stream for everyone. So yes, absolutely.
Hell yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you for supporting us.
Another question from there is no easy mode. What's your favorite Indian food?
Oh my
Oh
God.
damn, like a whole
Well, it
dish?
depends on what
Oh.
what time of the day it is. I really love. I'm known for as a child going to the restaurants and getting a paper roast. And a paper roast is a very fun Indian food. It's a very large dosa that is about like I think 2.5 feet at the end of it, and it's like this large crepe that like comes rolled. And
Oh, I've seen
I
those.
don't
Yeah, it's
know.
like the whole table.
Yes, exactly. It fills
Yeah.
the whole table. There are really huge versions of it that's like kind of meant to be eaten by the whole family. But as a child, it would be very cartoonish watching me order that and complete that entirely by myself. So yes, if I had to pick that, uh, it's definitely the paper roast, the paper dosa.
Okay, that is terrifying. God, for me, okay, so
It's amazing.
Gujarati
It's
food.
delicious.
I would love to try that one day. I mean, I've had dosas, just not the whole paper roast thing. Uh, I think so. I'm Gujarati, right? So for us, dar bhat, which means rice, and dar is your dal, I guess in English. I don't know. It's that soupy thing. So dar bhat and a sak. Sak means like a curry or a dish. So this is potato dish that my mom makes all the time. So it's a very childish food almost because potatoes, like who doesn't like potatoes, right? Um, the darbat and that potato dish with antarnu, which is the pickled mangoes, or anchat. I think some people say we say antarnu, but just that is a very like homey meal to me. And I also really like hanvo, which is a
Mm.
Gujarati, I guess snack appetizer like food.
You're making me very hungry.
Yes, I know. I'm gonna have some tomorrow. Like I'm actually having some tomorrow, and I'm like really excited.
Yeah, the biggest struggle about working on Venba is that we're hungry all the time because
Oh
we're,
my God, yeah,
we're
right. It's
thinking about and
awful.
looking at food all of the time. And I'm like, how is this? How is one supposed to? This is not, like I wasn't
I've
trained for
complained a
this.
lot to our designer. I'm like, this is not
Yeah.
okay. I just had lunch.
Yes. Oh, amazing. Well, we do try out a lot of different foods for research. So that's I guess that's fun.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay. So there's no more questions. Da, 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 da. Okay, we could just outro out and yeah. Well, thank you everyone for coming. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation and look forward to the game because it gets even better.
Thanks, everyone. It's a lot of fun.